Hello, welcome back. This is Debbie with Light Up Your Worth, and I am in such a almost meditative, calm space, but I'm so delighted today to bring my friend Bernie Bowman to you. Bernie and I met many years ago, probably about 7 years ago now, and we met in an online business group. And I was just drawn to her presence, her there was this calmingness about her and how she would ask the questions in our course that were really enlightening for myself, and it reminded me of really staying focused on why I was in this course. And so with that, it was a small group, and so I really got to know Bernie and her work. And so I am so delighted that she is joining me. And so welcome, Bernie. I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you for inviting me, Debbie.
Yeah, this is like um, I we've spent some time, and I want Bernie. I'd like for you to share more about like who is Bernie? What is Bernie all about, and what um, what have you experienced that you'd like to share? And because it's a pretty big, it's a story, and I'd really love to hear about your healing journey and this holistic approach that you have taken to help yourself.
Okay. So again, my name is Bernie Bowman, and I'm from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. And currently, I'm living on the island of Cozumel in Mexico with my husband. We live here about 7 months of the year, and then we go back for the summer back up to Canada. So um, with Debbie's podcast program, Light Up Your Worth, um, I probably, like many other women, didn't always know my worth or feel my worth, and it it really was quite bad when I experienced some traumas in my life, and um, so anyway, I should say that what I am is a TFT, thought field therapy tapping practitioner. Many that, and I specialize in trauma, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and grief. And many people know tapping as the more well-known form of EFT, also known as emotional freedom techniques, or tapping for short. So the reason I came to this modality of an alternative way of healing trauma was I myself was a victim of a violent crime. Not once, not twice, but 3 times in the course of my whole life.
Wow.
So when I came to tapping, you name it, I tried it. I tried everything under the sun from A to Z. I tried the jungle juices. Tried talk therapy, group therapy, this vitamin, that mineral, this approach, that approach, you name it. I was just desperate to get back to myself, get back to how I used to be before the two traumas affected me to the point where I actually had complex post-traumatic stress disorder. So I had one trauma. I guess it was about 16 years ago. My oldest brother was a victim of a violent crime, and I ended up with PTSD. And I still was able to function. I still carried on my fundraising and event planning business, and that went on. However, 5 years after my older brother's trauma, and he survived. He has a brain injury now, but he's self-sufficient. Then would you believe my second brother had a major trauma happen to him. He was also a victim of a violent crime. And unfortunately, he did not survive his injuries. So because I um, still had the first trauma, now I have the second trauma. So now I have complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And shortly after the second trauma, I had to shut down my fundraising and event planning business. I could no longer work. Functioning was rather difficult, to say the least. And that's why I kind of was out there, really searching and really trying to find something to make me feel better. And then I found tapping.
Oh, what a, I mean, that just really talks about your resilience too, of I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to allow
Mm.
myself to lose the rest of my time here. And the strength to know that there had to be something out there. I just really commend you, Bernie, for that resilience, that strength that you
Mhm.
had inside of you to know that you needed to find a way.
Thank you. And Debbie, I smile when you say resilience because that word has been coming up everywhere for me. And it's kind of funny because I am now running a weekly book club, and I call it Book and Beyond with Bernie. Kind of a take on Bath and Beyond. I call it Book
Yeah.
and Beyond with Bernie. And actually, the book that we're reading right now eh, um, is Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and it's all about being resilient, and it just
Hmm.
really ties in. And again, because I live in Mexico, I call it Corona, not COVID, but because we're living in Corona times, we need to become even more resilient than ever. Because this thing just does not seem like it's going away anytime soon. We're still here. So
Yeah.
with the coronavirus. So anyway, so resilient. Yeah, it's just it's definitely the word for 2021.
Right. Oh my gosh. I mean, and isn't that book one of those books that when you put yourself in that role? I don't know if
Mhm.
listeners here, I'll put it in the show notes for anybody who has not read that book, but I know I was exposed to it when I was in school, like college
Oh.
school, and we had to study it. And it's about a man who is part of, for those the listeners who aren't familiar with this book, it's award winning, talking about this gentleman's experience to the concentration camps and how he survived, and how he was able to go internally within himself with his own thoughts to keep himself healthy. And he really links like the physical health with his mental health.
Mhm.
When that's what I got out of it. I don't know what your thoughts are
Yeah.
on that book, but it was really, I think, I read it like 20 years ago, and it was probably one of the first experiences of me trying to understand the connection between our mind and our physical body. So
Mm.
I think that's super intriguing that you are reading that book and studying it with your book club, and
Yeah.
with the work that you're doing. Like,
Yeah.
wow, like how powerful, uh with gosh, I'm just seeing like a program, honestly, Bernie, is what I got. So I just thought, wow, wouldn't it be an amazing way to be able to go through and help so many people with um
Mhm.
this
Yeah.
this work.
It's really a fascinating book, and I'm just absolutely fascinated about that whole Nazi era. In fact, yesterday my husband and I were on a walking tour
Mm.
in Germany, and they showed East Germany and back there in the wartime. So I do find it fascinating. But just what you said, that's exactly what we're doing. When I say we're reading, it's not exactly your typical book club. We're using the book as a basis, and weekly, I'm tapping with people. We're doing energy exercises. We're doing affirmations. We're basically, what it is I'm calling it my book club, but I'm basically inviting people to be part of Book and Beyond. And I'm sharing my practices uh, of how I can be resilient. with everything I've gone through and everything I'm going through with this whole lockdown business with the coronavirus. So I'm so it's a program in itself, and we're using the book as a basis for. We do discuss it at the beginning, and then we, whatever somebody's had trouble with that week, whatever their MPI, I call it, their most pressing issue is for the week, then, I want to help others to be resilient as well. And so then we do some work on that within the hour of the book club.
Oh, I absolutely, I got the shivers when you started to share that, because having spent quite a bit of time studying that book um, and understanding what you're doing, with your thought field therapy and the EFT with the tapping, especially since I've experienced it, right? Like, wow. Like, and
Yeah.
in my beliefs, I believe in how trauma is passed down, intergenerational trauma, and how many people who not only who did survive, like the doctor, but they then passed along all of those fears and how they lived, and how that could easily trigger people without even really realizing that subconscious connection with our own um, shutdown of everything, right? Like, there's a lot of parallel thoughts there. I think I could see where it could trigger a lot of people. And I know depression right now is just a big struggle for a lot of people I know, and children, and all of the changes that we've had. And so, wow, I like that, the book and beyond.
With Bernie.
Yeah,
Had
with
to get all
Bernie.
those triple B's in there.
Yeah.
So intergenerational trauma is a real thing, scientifically proven, scientifically discussed. So as horrific as the Nazi concentration camps were, the children and the grandchildren, if trauma has not been dealt with, it's just there sitting in your central nervous system, sitting within the energy of your body. And what the tapping does is, one of my good friends, Gwen, she calls it bubbles, trauma bubbles. So what the tapping does, when we're physically tapping with our fingers on acupressure points on our face and our body, it is sending a calming signal to the amygdala portion of the brain, which is your fight, flight, or freeze response. And they actually even threw in another F word. Now they call it flop. You know how when animals, when they feel threatened, they just flop over and pretend they're dead. So, that's what people do. They get into this, when a person's shocked or traumatized, they get into this frozen state. So now they call it flop as well. So I've got to remember an extra F word, flop word. So fight, flight, freeze, or flop. It's all the body's way and your mind's way of trying to protect yourself. And Debbie, if I could just backtrack up just a little bit for your listeners that may not be familiar with tapping, EFT, TFT, all of that. So going from memory, approximately 36 years ago, a certified board psychologist living in California, United States, he had a patient, and her name was Mary. And Mary had a major phobia to water. The poor woman couldn't drink water, brush her teeth, have a bath, have a shower. She couldn't even manage to do the dishes. Like, she was extremely fearful of water. Hence, it was more than just your regular, just a fear. It was actually a major phobia. And the doctor had worked with her, treating her for about a year and a half. And at that time, towards the end of the treatment of a year and a half, he happened to be studying Chinese acupuncture and kinesiology. And the best way I can describe kinesiology, I didn't really look it up in a dictionary ahead of time, but it's working with these body systems. So he said to her one day, he said, Mary, we've been doing this for about a year and a half and you're nowhere near better. I have this new thing. I don't know if it's going to do anything or not, but all I want you to do, and this woman did it for a whole hour. He said, all I want you to do is tap underneath your eye. Let me just remove my glasses. So all she did for an hour for her treatment session was tap underneath her eye. And so we now know that each tapping point, like I said, on the face and on the body, is correlated to either an organ or a gland in your body. Well, under the eye is connected to the stomach. And you've probably heard this expression before, that the stomach is the seat of all fears. And you yourself have heard that expression as well as, oh, you know, when you have that intuition that you yourself talk about, you just have that feeling or that sense, and you just say, oh, I can just feel that in my gut, you know. And that's why is because the under the, or not that that's why, but the under the eye pressure point is related to the stomach. Well, she had a major fear of water. So this is what they did for an hour. So as per Dr. Roger Calhoun, who is the psychologist, his practice was he checked in with his patients the next day via telephone. So he phones her up, excuse me, and he said, Mary, how are you doing today? How are you feeling? And she goes, and how was last night? She goes, oh, it was great. I went home. I had a glass of water to drink with my dinner. I did the dishes. I brushed my teeth. And then I had a nice bath before, a nice relaxing bath before I went to bed. And he's like, what? And he said, Mary, I'd like to see you again, but instead of coming to my office, can you come to my home? And so they made the arrangements. Mary went down to his home, and being in Southern California, he had a swimming pool in the back of his yard. So they went down to the pool, and he's like, oh, you know, all feeling trepidation and everything, doesn't want to, you know, trigger his patient. And he said, I don't know if you can do this, but let's just sit at the edge of the pool. And all I want you to do is dip your toes in the pool. Can you do that for me? Can you try it? And she's like, yeah, I'll try it. They went down. Mary got right into the pool. Well, the good doctor just couldn't believe his eyes. And he thought, I'm really onto something here. So he started developing this technique of what's now known as tapping. And tapping is literally tapping with your fingertips on one of the pressure points that relates to an organ or a gland in your body. And you're releasing those trauma bubbles when you do that. And you're sending that calming signal to the back of your brain, the amygdala. So Dr. Roger developed this technique, and he called it thought field therapy. And this is really important it was really what attracted me to be able to help other people. I didn't want to, I mean, I've had my own traumas. I didn't want to be bombarded with everybody else's trauma. Not that I wasn't compassionate or cared for people, but like I said, I already had my own to deal with, and I dealt with it. I don't want to go back there. So when I work with people, it's awesome for them because they don't have to tell me their trauma. They don't have to talk about it. They don't have to relive it like they're a victim on trial in a court case and retelling it. So it's great. So they're not re-triggering their trauma and reliving the nightmare all over. I just instruct people to think about the trauma for 30, 45, 60 seconds, not long enough to go into complete distress or total meltdown. And then we start tapping it away. It just works great, not only for them, but for me as well.
Oh, yeah, because you're actually doing it with them. I know when
Yes.
we did ours, like you were doing it with me.
Tapping along. Yes.
And we had, just for the listeners to know, because I've been following Bernie's work for years, and I do part of her EFT, and we have done some now TFT, thought field therapy. I have to look at my notes to make sure I say it right. But um, we walked through a trauma that I had experienced, and the amount of release in my body was phenomenal. Like,
Mhm.
and it was just for a very short period of time. And I have found I've been using some of it like with my collarbone for quite some time, especially if I'm like in a stressful like work and work, nobody really knows what I'm doing, right? And I can do it without it really causing anybody to even know what I'm doing. And I know that it has helped me in situations where I might feel a little anxious, or um, it just sometimes it just feels natural for me to grab my collarbone and even just tap on one side of it. And
Mhm.
I never really knew that. I've kind of naturally done it a lot of my life.
Mhm.
Something with my collarbone. I don't know why, you know.
Yeah. You know what? That's interesting, Debbie, because when a person starts learning tapping and doing the tapping, they end up finding their favorite tapping point. And mine is the same as yours. My favorite one is the collarbone. And you're going to see, even on tapping videos and whatnot, people will tap here, people will tap with the opposite hand, or they'll tap with both. They're all correct. What I teach my clients and my students that I like to do is I like to spread out my hand, and then I tap both sides. So now I'm tapping both at the same time with one hand, and it's very comforting. So if you're watching the news, listening to something distressing, or talking to somebody on the phone and it's upsetting, all you can do is just sit there and tap. You got the phone in one hand or whatever, and then you're just simply tapping, and it'll diffuse the bad news. It'll help you to cope better and to process any news quicker and faster. I really wish, when I was going through the traumas with my two brothers, that I had known tapping, because then I could have, I was watching the news a lot, because I was, with other victims of violent crime, and we were supporting each other. I wish I would have known the tapping back then I could have at least done that. But I know it now. And I just want to clarify, because mainstream media, or on mainstream online, most people do know, um or I should say, a lot of people do know, and more people are getting to know about tapping. And it's called they call it EFT, emotional freedom techniques. So what's the difference between what I do and EFT? Is nothing, because actually I'm certified in both. But what the difference is Dr. Roger is the one who started off this whole tapping thing. He called it thought field therapy. He had a young fellow who was an engineer student, and he was also a student of Dr. Roger, and his name is Gary Craig. And a lot of people have learned tapping from Gary Craig. Gary Craig, being the engineer, he and a student of Dr. Roger, he could see the value in this TFT, thought field therapy thing, that he was learning from him. And so what he thought is, so for the longest time, TFT was just done in clinical settings. A lot of psychologists, social workers, nurses help their patients and clients with it. He decided that he thought he would make it easier for people. And in one way, in a lot of ways it was. But what he did was, instead of doing the different algorithms and the different sequences, which Dr. Roger had, so basically when I say sequences and algorithms, there's different tapping routines or tapping processes for various traumas, various emotions, various feelings, and various other issues, like different ones for anxiety, panic, even if you want to be motivated to do well in school or at a sports event. There's a tapping sequence for almost everything. And so he thought he's going to make it easier, and let's just, instead of doing these variety of different processes. Let's just make it one way. Typically it starts at the eyebrow, goes through about 10 different points, ending up including the top of the head at the, for number 10. And what he did was he added words. So here's the difference. With TFT, you just feel the sensation once you start thinking about the issue you're working on at hand, and then you start the tapping. With the EFT, emotional freedom techniques, you have to have the exact words for it to really work as well as it would work for TFT with just the feeling. So there's many people that get caught up in the EFT. Oh, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to say it. I don't, remember this or that. And they get a little flustered, but both are very good modalities. And when I work with people, I usually do a combination of both, which I now call, I will do some TFT. I always start off with that. And then whatever their issue is that we're working on, I'll move into EFT as well. So I do bounce between the two of them. And now, then there was another fellow, and his name is Robert Smith. And he thought, oh, I'm going to make this even easier for people. And he only uses half of the points, and he called it faster EFT because it is fast. You just use half of the points. And that one, I've been helped with that one. And I know how to do it. I'm not certified in that one. And so, because as you can tell, I'm like Debbie, we like to talk. When I first started working with people, I think that's why we connect.
Right.
When I first started working with people, I was just doing it. If I wasn't in person with them, I was doing it over the telephone. So for the sake of not having a lot of dead air time, I started talking when I was doing the TFT. So now what I do is typically I'll do a little combination of both, a little bit of talking and just doing the algorithms without the talking. And so I call it TTT, and I call it trauma or transformational tapping, or transformational trauma tapping. So again, more letters to tell people about, but basically what it is all tapping, and it all works really great.
I wish everybody here could experience tapping. And I think I'm going to need to have you come into my membership, right? And do a workshop there and really get people exposure when they join our membership. But it's been so beneficial. I mean, I have shared it with multiple friends who are part of your Facebook group, and I've experienced some of it, and I know that it's making a difference for them. I know it's made a difference for me, because what I found, which is so powerful about your story, Bernie, is that we've all had moments in time where something happens and we feel that angst, or we feel like, who did feel angst last year? I mean, I don't think anybody did not feel angst, but sometimes that angst just overcomes us, and you get you stuck in it, and being able to have something that is so practical, so really holistic, that you can do and help yourself. I mean, it's so powerful. And what you had mentioned at the earlier part of when we were talking was that this has helped you find your own worth.
Yeah.
I mean, and how impactful is that, to know that you are making such an impact on the world?
Thank you. Yeah, when you talk about lighting up our worth, and I know that's exactly what you're very passionate about, Debbie, is empowering other women. This is a very empowering practice. It's something that, and I learned this from Nick, another tapper. He, and if you are a tapper, you know who I'm talking about. He had this saying that I can teach you how to tap in 5 minutes, However, it will take a lifetime to master. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm not too sure if that was Nick, but anyway, I heard it from someone and it's true. Like, I taught you that you already knew EFT. I taught you like in less than 5 minutes how to tap the different points in it. I mean, there are the same points, but I taught you in 5 minutes how we were going to tap a different style in TFT way, and in two short processes, one for for an old trauma, and most people do have old childhood traumas. They may or may not be aware of them, but they are affecting you and still running the show in your adult life. And then we tapped on an emotion, and two different processes. So it's you can learn from YouTube, you can learn from somebody like me in 5 minutes, but it does take a lifetime to master. And that's just a saying. And so I have I had so much trauma in my life, and it had affected my life. It affected my family's life. It just changed everything. I had to shut down my business. I couldn't work. I couldn't function. And I tried everything. And then when I learned tapping, it was very empowering. It made me feel like my life was worth something again. It made me feel worthy again. And I always wanted to, I always said, if I could just get better, if I could just, get rid of this PTSD, I would like to help other women. Because a lot of people don't realize that you can actually heal from PTSD. I still have friends that don't even know that you can heal from PTSD. They think, once you have it, you don't. And I do know that it was Rick Wilkes. Rick Wilkes, who's a topper, he had a little poster, and he said, if a trauma can happen to you in 30 seconds, why can't, little bit of work, why can't it unhappen to you? And it can. I'm living proof that if a person's gone through trauma, not once, not twice, but actually, and we haven't discussed this, I had a childhood trauma, which was a major trauma, and that's a third trauma. So, a person can get better. They can get their life back together. And it's just as fast and easy, and it's right there at your fingertips.
Well, what's so what I find intriguing about this, Bernie, is that the one trauma that we worked on wasn't an actual trauma that occurred to me. Like it was something as a small child I heard or must have seen it on TV, and then I forgot about it, right? Like you went on, grew up, and then all of a sudden I kept seeing and thinking about this trauma. I had to go look it up and go find out, what is this? And like, why did all of a sudden is it coming out into my thought? And I didn't even know really what this was. I go find out it's actually did something that happened. So obviously I saw it on TV growing up, and my body remembered it, and then it gets triggered. And I know that a lot of children have been in environments where there's real trauma right there in front of them. So mine wasn't in front of me, but I still took that trauma in the violence in to my own cells. And so, in one session, over 50% of that feeling was left from my body. I mean, wow, that is, it's just remarkable. And so I just I'm so happy that we're connected, and I would love for you to share how can what do you have going on that people can reach out? Like, I know you have a Facebook group, and how else can how can people reach you? Yeah, how can people reach you to figure out more about your programs that you're offering and your coaching that you're doing? Because I think it's really important that people know how to reach you.
Okay. And I just want to clarify, not to correct you, Debbie, but I always tell people my work is efficient and effective. And people don't believe me. They don't realize until we actually get working, because it wasn't even a whole session you and I had time for.
Wow, I know. It was
It
amazing.
was like less than a half an hour.
I know, right? And then I'm like, wow. Like, and I know too, if I start feeling this sensation again at night, right? Because mine's
Mhm.
connected with dark, that I know now what I can go try and help
And
even
do,
remove it even more out of my
yeah.
cellular memory.
Exactly, exactly. So, okay, so I'll let people know how they can be in contact with me. But this was so exciting, our time together that we did tapping. It kind of reminded me of another person, another lady that I had an opportunity to tap with. If I could just mention, because it
Oh,
was very,
please,
very
please. Yes.
exciting. This is how this type of work can be. So a lady came to me and she said, and it was interesting wording. She said, I know I've had a trauma. I don't know when it was, or I don't even know what it was, but I know I just had this feel. We're women, we're very intuitive female beings. I just have this feeling in my body. I just have this knowing in my mind that something happened to me. And I said, don't even worry about it, dear. We don't need to know what the trauma is, when it was, how it happened, when it happened. We don't need to know anything about it. I just want you to just feel that kind of feeling that you know that something bad happened to you. So her and I were guessing that it was obviously at a very, very young age that something happened. Well, I work, I do a lot of my work. I help, I ask people to commit to getting better and feeling better. And I do 5-week packages. I will do a one-on-one session, a one-off session, because hey, that's the type of work I do. I'm in trauma, I'm in PTSD, I'm in grief. So obviously, if you're feeling that, you're not ready to sign up to a 5-week uh, uh, tapping thing. Tapping session. But if something just recently happened and you need help, we're just gonna go ahead and do it in one session. To at least start with anyway. And quite often, quite often, and this is how why tapping is so amazing, you might not even need the other 4 sessions. So let's just go ahead and take care of this for you. So she came to me, and to this day, and she felt so much better. She felt that the trauma was released. It no longer bothered her. It no longer affected her. It wasn't even coming up into her thoughts anymore, or her memory, or her feelings. And to this day, we were both amazed, because both of us didn't know what the trauma was. And yet she was helped. And that's what happened to me when my practitioner helped me, when I finally found tapping, and I hired a practitioner as well. For 2 years, he didn't even know what my trauma was. The only reason he found out was 2 years later. I'm now taking, I started taking courses from him, and um, and just in general chit chat and conversation. Then he found out what my trauma was, but he didn't need to know. So that's so good, because people might not want to talk about their trauma. They don't have to, but that's how
Mhm.
amazing this is, and that's why I'm passionate about it. Sorry, I'm so passionate I
Well,
got
and
carried away.
that's why I was so passionate about having you on, Bernie, because there's such a need. There's
Hmm.
such a need. There's so many people who are
Hmm.
hurting, and they
Yeah.
need to be able to find
Yeah, and
a healthy way.
especially now, like Debbie was mentioning about the COVID-19 situation, I have found in the last year that people were getting triggered, and it was maybe they had some loneliness, they had depression, they have sadness, they had anxiety, they had panic attacks, and maybe these things weren't completely helped the first time around with whatever they were doing. And whatever they were doing was fine, because that's what they knew at the time to be able to help themselves. But now all of a sudden we're in a global pandemic, it's worldwide, everybody's sort of in the boat, and a lot of people have been having trouble. And that's why, because we went back to Debbie's childhood, to a trauma that was on the news or talked about in the house as a child. Um, and so something in your past, if you are having trouble, you're overwhelmed right now, you're all these different feelings that come with being, at home all the time. Um, something we could tap on, all of that. And if we tap on something that might have happened to you as a young child, it's amazing. It's like a puzzle piece. We're putting this all together, and how it's connected. It'll just, it just blows people's minds.
It does.
But
It does. I mean, it was amazing of how, in just a short period of time, connecting something that I had never connected from
yeah,
watching on the news or hearing about it being talked about, and connecting it with something that did happen as a child. Like I had no idea. And then how that connects to now.
mhm,
Like I
yeah,
had no idea. Like
yeah.
that was so powerful.
So, getting back to Debbie's question, how people can reach me is, again, my name is Bernie Bowman, and I'm from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. I'm easily found on Facebook. You can personally message me through Facebook. My Facebook group is called Tapping and Tips for Peace and Calm. And the end sign is that little plus sign. It's not spelled out. So tapping and tips for peace and calm. And probably in the next month or so, I have to lock in a date. I am going to be doing a free webinar. And the name of the webinar is going to be Transform Your Trauma to Break Free from Your Past. And this is going to really help people because they don't have to feel trapped. They don't have to feel stuck in things that happen to them, you know, in early in their life or from the past, so that it's not affecting them anymore. And so that'll just free people up and be able to, live their life the way they want to live their life, and not be, trapped and stuck from something that might not even have happened to you, but might have happened to somebody in your family, friends, complete strangers, even on the news, just like what happened with Debbie. So that's how I can be reached. And for those that know Debbie, you can personally, obviously, reach out to her, and I'll leave my email with Debbie as well, if you
Okay.
prefer email as opposed to Facebook Messenger.
I love that. Well, thank you so much, Bernie. It's been uh, so delightful that I was able to share, this holistic approach to healing. And, I'm the one who's all woo, but I do, um, believe in alternative methods, in even if somebody is going to therapy, which I have been to therapy, so I don't ever hide that. And so it's so beautiful that this is even something that they could add on to something else that they're going through, and not actually even affect some, like they go so well together just because
Yeah.
of the nature of how they're there's all the science that's behind it, and it's so well respected in that community as well. So
Yeah,
thank you
exactly.
so much, Bernie. I so appreciate it.
Thank you for
Okay,
having me, Debbie.
thanks.